Tell us about the shift in the management of the school being entirely by the congregation of the Christian brothers to being managed by the teachers also.
Well, that hasn't happened. I mean, you're jumping the gun by maybe several years. And you can't dive into that situation without a little bit of background. Initially, we would have 4 or 5 brothers teaching in the school here. And some are young and some are more mature. And they would put in sufficient time teaching in Goa to be qualified as headmasters' principals. That doesn't happen now because there's an age bar. And since we're aided, every person who's over the limit has to be accepted. And also, they're supposed to have taught so many years in Goa. Coupled with that is a movement amongst us, as we call it, our way into the future. And we're trying to get back to the initial motivation, charism of our founder, Blessed Edmund Rice. He started for people who were deprived, who were not afforded an education. In fact, because of their religion, they were barred from schools. They couldn't go, and he started with them with street children and helped them to come up. And I suppose a lot of us thought when we were called to serve in foreign countries, we would be dealing with very, very poor people and empowering them, educating them. But as I said, because we came in British India, and there were Irish people, the Irish and the English were at loggerheads. So it is an anomaly that in India, the Irish brothers became associated with the British Raj because the officers in the British Army wanted their sons educated by the brothers. And that's what happened then, that gradually we had more elitist schools than we had schools specifically for the poor. So to redress that, there's a movement on at the moment, as well as the last number of years, our way into the future, where in an area that's not developed, a rural area, we would establish 3 or 4 small communities of brothers, 4 in each community, within a night's journey of each other. So you'd have a hub and 3 or 4 other communities, and they would work in that area, learn the languages, and give whatever help they could. Not necessarily in education, in anything where they were required, but because of our history and who we are, I can see that in most cases the people will look for a school, which we would settle and move on. Because of that situation, where a lot of our young people are going to the villages, and the drop in vocations, which is happening all over the world, we have very, very few brothers now teaching in Regina Mundi. So the thing came up with, well, what happens in the future? Say if there's no brother available. So on that, they're working on it. You're well ahead of the posse that you are. You're jumping the gun by some years. They're trying to establish some kind of trust where brothers will be responsible management and appoint others who are not brothers to run the school. It has happened in some of our schools in the north where we have what they call lay principals, men and women who are not brothers. In fact, in a few cases, they're not even Christian. And that caused ripples because they thought we were too broad-minded. But for us, it's not a matter of religion, it's a matter of spirituality.
So basically, the question was not from the perspective of the management per se, but it was from the regards of, what you said, values. So the dissemination of values which come from the congregation, do they still assimilate the same way?
Yeah.
It comes from a lay person who is having a different lifestyle altogether.
Yes.
So how is that impacting the?
Well, I can speak about Ireland because where we were in every small town and every city in Ireland before, and we had plenty of brothers to run these places. Gradually, the same thing happened there, with people becoming more well off, getting jobs. First of all, the idea of living a life of poverty, chastity and obedience didn't appeal. So our society's become very materialistic, understandably so. And then the schools became works of art with state-of-the-art facilities, and one tended to be kind of building up a big school and getting better results and better facilities, and maybe forgetting that the poor, there were still poor around. Like in Ireland, you had people who were, what they called them, itinerants, people who had no fixed abode, gypsies wandering around. You had other people who were drug addicts, and I believe that's where we could have kind of made a bigger impact than we did. Now, we've done something for them, but we ended up with having all these schools and few brothers to be in charge of them. So they have brothers at the top as a trust. They run the schools and they are careful about the ethos, and they would be the ones who would appoint those who are to be in charge in management. And they would try to ensure as far as possible that they would be filled with the spirit of Edmund Rice. And you can look at this two ways. Edmund Rice was a married man. He was widowed at 28 with a child who was both mentally and physically handicapped. Now you bring in a man who's a married man. There are lots of things in his life where he can identify with Edmund Rice and what he did as a layman, because he was 40 before we got the first school. So from the age of 28 to 40, as a layperson, he did that. He certainly was a religious man, and he attracted like-minded people to follow him. And it was only after that that they began to form what we call the Brotherhood. So there are those who would say that some of our lay principals are even more zealous than the brothers were, because they're seeing it from two sides of the fence, as married people and then the religious aspect. So it's an interesting situation anyway. And please God, it will work out okay.